think, one of the world's leading HR directors sat next to me. Amanda, how long have we known each other for now? It feels like a long time, but it's actually probably not that long. I think it was when you came out of Adidas that we started to talk.
Yeah, I think end of last year,
Yeah, and it's been an absolute delight to spend some time
I feel like I've known you for a very long time. It feels like I've known you since I started out or something.
Hopefully in a good way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm really pleased that you've come to talk to me today. And as you know, guys, we've been doing a series called In the Spotlight, looking at some of the leading people within the industry about how they have gone about their journey, learnings, inspirations, achievements. And, one of the things that interests me is that you've got such an amazing background, so rich in terms of the things that you've done, the international movements, the different industry sectors. And I know you don't talk about it a lot, but also your achievements in sort of championing the diversity agenda, which I think you've done at world level, and I actually think that you have been at the forefront of that over the last 5 years, although I haven't said that directly to you. I genuinely believe that. So thank you for joining us. So let's talk a bit more about your story. Sure. Yeah. So tell us, how did you actually get into HR? What happened?
Yeah, sure. So I did a psychology degree at London University. I grew up in a small town called Northampton, which is on the way to the north.
Yeah, I know Northampton.
And I came up to London to do my degree, and I, at that point, wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I graduated, and then after numerous rejections from Masters of Science courses, because I wanted to go to an institution and do my Masters of Science, I realised, okay, I need to forget this. I was being rejected because I didn't have an experience in a clinical setting. So I decided to move to research psychology for some years. That didn't give me much money and was painfully slow. And then a friend called me up and said, hey, why don't you think about headhunting? So I was like, headhunting? What is that? I have no idea. And I basically joined an organisation, my first recruitment company called JM Management Services.
I know JM.
John Muskelly's business. And I started as a technology recruiter there.
Good firm. I remember I started in the year 2000 at financial services recruitment firm in technology. So pretty similar, although I stayed in agency all these years, and you obviously evolved into into the internal side.
And so what happened was, after kind of learning the basics of technology recruitment, which was of course huge in those years, I went on site at JP Morgan. I was asked to go on site to help manage all of the other agencies. And I quickly found a real home within the HR department there. A great manager who's still a very good contact today. And basically, I learnt my trade really there, how to do internal recruitment. And then we merged with JP Morgan merged with Chase, and brought Fleming's too. And I was then asked to head up front office recruitment, which was a big pivotal moment for me, because I was fairly young, hadn't the foggiest about what front office really was. I knew they were these mythical traders and salespeople, but if you asked me what a bond was, I had no clue. So it was an extremely big learning curve for me to kind of get from knowing a little bit about how to hire infrastructure people, programmers, and application development people, to suddenly hiring bankers, traders, corporate financiers, analysts, and really learning those different parts of what makes up the bank very quickly, and having to manage 3 disparate recruitment strategies and something like 250 agencies and recruitment firms.
Yeah.
So that was quite an interesting first experience, and it was. I remember moving from JM on site at JP Morgan. I remember getting some advice from one of the CEOs at the time. He said, JP Morgan is full of martini people. And I was like, martini people? What do you mean? He said, well, they're very slick, they're very well dressed, they're charming, they're intelligent, you've got to be it all. And I think I took that really seriously. Not, it was from the advert martini, and so I did try to emulate that. I definitely wanted to be that person with a really rounded kind of background and presence, and I loved it the moment I walked into Old School building, which is now not there. Of course, it was the former headquarters, and I just thought, wow, I've arrived. That's what I thought. But quickly after a couple of years, actually 3 years during recruitment, I was then asked to move to become an HRBP. And again, a mythical thing for me at that time, because what I saw HRBPs being was obviously very client-facing,
Yes.
but didn't really know what they did. At least with recruitment, it was tangible. We brought great candidates in, and suddenly I was being asked to move on to the other side. So it was a challenge, but also really started my career in HR.
Yeah, and obviously you went through the stellar growth, which culminated obviously in the move to America.
Yes.
Which must have been super exciting, you
yes,
know.
Absolutely.
So, you know, tell us a little bit more about, you know, obviously you went over, you got to a point where you were leading effectively BNP Paribas. What was that like, you know, in terms of, you know, the culture in New York and moving over there to lead from the front from that perspective?
Yeah.
How did that feel?
So it was a really amazing opportunity for me, and I would say to anyone in their career, early career or even mid-career, if you get the opportunity to work abroad and it fits your circumstances and family, etc., I would absolutely encourage it, because it absolutely broadens you. It takes you out your comfort zone. You have to learn what it's like to work in a different geography with different cultures, and you also need to learn different technical domains. And for me, it really brought a different, I guess, acceleration for me in terms of my experience and also my skills. So I loved it, and having now worked and lived in the US, in New York, and in Germany, Nuremberg, and now back to London after 8 years, I feel like I've grown so much in many, many ways.
Yeah, so, you know, let's talk about that. So you're in New York doing super well, you get the call, you know, and it's Adidas.
Yeah.
Like, you know, BNP Paribas, obviously amazing brand, but Adidas is like probably one of the most iconic brands in the world. In fact, I think I'm wearing.
You're wearing
them today,
yeah.
I'm on brand, you know. So was that a no-brainer, or was it, you know, was it a big decision? Because you moved again, relocating to, you know, to, I can't pronounce it, I'm not going to murder it.
Herzogenaurach is where they're headquartered.
But it's a campus, there's not much there.
No.
You know, there's obviously Adidas, I think Puma are around the corner as well. Talk through that journey. That's really interesting.
Yeah, sure. So I had been in New York for 5 years, coming up to 5 years. The last year was the unfortunate 2020, when a number of very, I think, size-wise significant time events happened. Number one, it was the murder of George Floyd. Number two, we had COVID. And number three, there was a lot of social unrest on many, many topics.
Yeah.
So it was a tough year, and because of COVID, I wasn't able to travel home for 9 months and see my family here in London. So that was getting a little bit difficult to kind of live with every day. Secondly, I'd been at BNP Paribas in total for 12 years. It was a long time to be in any one organisation, and I still didn't quite see my way to the top there. It is a French bank, so not being able to speak French is, I think, a slight handicap, and I think that would have always been something I'd had to get over. So glass ceiling was definitely visible for me. So I was thinking about what is next.
Yeah.
Out of the blue, as you say, I got this call. Had I dreamt of working in the sporting goods industry? Unlike you, James, I'm not as sporty as you are, but I absolutely saw the fashion side, the athleisure side, these huge icons that have collaborations, and I thought this is an amazing brand with an amazing DNA. Now, I did the entire interview in COVID. So my whole interview process, which was around probably 8 meetings in total, was done remotely.
Really? You've never met anybody in person before you went?
And if I had actually gone to Herzogenaurach, I think I would have been blown away by the campus, but I think I would have considered this is really the German countryside, a long way away from a kind of metropolitan city. So I would say Berlin being the most metropolitan in Germany. So I think it would have made me think twice. But of course, in hindsight, you take the swings and the roundabouts. It was an amazing opportunity.
Yes. The
3 things that Adidas needed help with at that time really appealed to my experience and also my interests. Help on the DEI front. At that time, the previous CHRO had been terminated from the organisation. There had been a lack of faith and confidence in the organisation's ability around representation and understanding of the lived experience of Black African American people. And thirdly, there was also a big concern about the external image of Adidas being one very much in the corner of Hispanic, African American, different minorities, and the internal reality of having very few people like that in the upper ranks of the organisation. When I got there were still employees picketing in our Portland office against the organisation. So it was a tinderbox of emotions, and joining and being able to immediately meet with the employee resource groups, meet with senior managers, being able to have the right language and articulation to work with those groups and communities really was a big part of what they needed me for.
Amazing.
The second thing was professionalizing the HR function. You wouldn't think it, but a firm like Adidas is has a HR department of around at that time 1,500 people. But there had never been a CHRO who came from an HR background. It was always coming from a business background. So this was a good opportunity for them to leverage that.
That's interesting. Some of those like world-class organisations, they do have good mobility internally, but without that domain expertise, potentially wouldn't be able to do some things that you as a career HR professional can do.
And what was great is that there were some very good units. I mean, there was great talent management processes, some very good recruitment processes, but nothing was joined together and really thought about in a holistic experience for employees. So there's a lot of work done into that, and obviously building the HR team. And then lastly, it was around, and I think this, as I've been meeting companies over the last year, and we can talk a little bit more about that, every organisation I speak to at the moment has an issue with leadership succession, getting the right top level people into those roles. And that is around, of course, succession planning and leadership development. So it was around help us build for the future, a much more diverse but also wider base of bringing people in with different technical expertise.
I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like nobody really knows what the future is. So planning for the future in terms of roles, when roles are consistently evolving and leaders need to really redefine how they're impacting their businesses, is super tough.
Yeah, really tough. And I think, one thing I can tell you is that having everyone from the same sector or background, so let's say sporting goods, is important to a firm like Adidas. But you absolutely need to bring technical expertise from different sectors as well. Because
diversity of thought brings that richness, right? I really believe in that.
And that was a large part of what the CEO at the time, Casper Rosted, had envisioned. And so with those three things, James, it was a sweet spot moment for me. It was like, I love those three things. And I went full guns blazing. And arrived on December the 15th, 2020, in Munich Airport, quickly whisked to the headquarters in Herzogenaurach, and that started my Adidas journey.
And what's been really interesting to me is just to get to know you as a person, and just to see the journey that I feel you've been on over the last year or so, in terms of the most high impact corporate career possible in HR. But I feel like you've had sort of almost like maybe epiphany is the wrong word, but you've been really thinking about what's been important to you during these times. How has that sort of manifested? Yeah,
sure. No, I love to talk about this, because I think as HR professionals, even leaders generally, we tend not to talk about the moments where we have to stop and reflect. And we spend most of our time talking about the incremental successes of our career. I will say my own personal background has, coming from, being second generation born immigrant in the UK, my sister and I, we were given this motivation of, you've got to do your very best, and we're giving you all of the things, all the equipment, base equipment you need, which is a good upbringing, a good education, ambition, and a loving home for you to excel. And I was lucky to have those things. And so there was no other option but to go.
Yeah.
And so I feel like for 29 years I've just gone.
Yeah.
I've just feel this, like, you know, those flaming wheel toys. I've just been like one of those.
Yeah. But you're not the only person, right? I think a lot of people feel like success is go, and it's higher, bigger.
Always.
Why
is progressive always upwards, right? You know. So yeah. So
it is though, isn't it?
It is. And so I think for me, having left Adidas after 3 years, and it was a difficult decision to leave for a few reasons, but coming back to London after 8 years and recamping, or kind of like decamping Germany and recamping in London has been I would say a transformative experience for me. Firstly, not working. I've never not worked, James. Even when I was at school, I was doing Saturday jobs, in the summer holidays working at Boots the Chemist. Nobody says Boots the Chemist anymore, do they? But Boots. And then moving up the, even at university, I was working in Safeways. Of course, that doesn't exist anymore. So always working, always on the move. And that was firstly, obviously, to make ends meet, but also to keep me busy and to stimulate my time. And I think that has been a hallmark of my career. I'm always busy.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, suddenly when you are faced with no work, and you take this moment to actually examine who you are, you realise that for me, and this is quite a personal feeling, I have really identified my personal success with my job. And that is something I think we all do at some point, but I think the degree of how I had identified was probably a bit too much.
Yes.
And of course, when you stop working, that job is gone. So you suddenly have to remember who you are,
yes,
and start remembering all the amazing gifts you have and have always had outside your day job. So it has been transformative in that way. Secondly, I have taken time out to really examine my wellness and health.
Yeah.
I'm probably the fittest I've ever been. I walk a lot of steps a day. I won't boast now. And of course, I've got the time and the peace to be able to do it as well. So thinking about fitness and health, and also being able to use my mind creatively on some of the things that I have kind of dampened over the course of my career. My charitable work, I'm currently the interim chair of an amazing charity called the Black British Initiative, which is around economic empowerment and giving entrepreneurs the opportunity to get a mini MBA.
Amazing. With
accredited course with London University SOAS.
That's amazing.
And it is a truly transformative for them, because they're able to, most people who start a business, particularly if you're coming from an underrepresented background, you don't have formal education, you haven't got access to doing an MBA or even a degree. You just start it and hope that you're going to earn money. And many of these businesses, of the participants that we've put through this, are earning somewhere around the range of £20,000 a year. So very small micro organisations. You wonder how they make ends meet. And their ability now to go through that course, it's only 10 weeks, and then be able to build their business and have a business plan with amazing tutors at SOAS is for them a huge accelerator in their life.
Yeah.
So for me, that has really taken quite a bit of my time up and my thinking time. But I've also pursued something I love doing, which is writing, and having a voice out there around topics that I'm passionate about, equity, leadership, workplace well-being, and also topics that sometimes come up from time to time on Netflix, different documentaries, different moments in what's happening in the world, and being able to also give a view on that as well. Yeah. But always linked to humans and what it means for people and their growth.
Yeah, so I think, it's interesting to hear that sometimes we need to stop, or it's okay to stop and think and not be worried about that means we're not being successful.
Yeah.
We sometimes need that time. I suppose what's interesting for me is that you're obviously going to go on to continue to be busy, probably go into another huge corporate role at some point if you wanted to.
Yeah.
How are you going to harness what you've learned so far when you're going to have those demands? And obviously some of the people that are watching or listening, they're probably in big jobs at the moment. How do we find that time? How do you make that happen, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's mythical. It's like how do you take the learnings you have and also apply them every day? Because I know how I am. Once I get into a problem, into a challenge, into a role where there's going to need to be great work done with teams, I'm 100% in, and you know, time flies through the window and you're just suddenly well into it, and of course sacrificing evenings and weekends again. And I really have thought hard about this. How do I keep that balance, and how also do I find a way to I guess restrain myself a little bit. Maybe it's not restraint, but maybe it's also course correct a little bit. One thing I've done is written a credo to myself through you know, speaking to professionals and having some time out as well. I've been able to write a credo of key moments that have been important to me in this year and things I don't want to lose by moving on to the next stage. And one of them, quite simply, is that it's not the end of the world. Sometimes when you're in a very busy role and you think this is so important, this is everything, it's engulfed you, and actually if you're able to take a step back in that moment, actually you realize that sometimes it isn't the end of the world. It's going to be okay, and being able to almost filter your thinking to think about the fact that is a problem in that moment, but there are much bigger things and a greater a viewpoint that you need to also take. We can become very myopic when we're leading and where we believe we're in a challenge, and that's something I have to also keep remembering. So it isn't the end of the world is my first line on my credo. Yeah,
that's interesting, that learning. You know, I mean, obviously you've talked through your story there about all the amazing things that you've done over the last sort of, like, you know, put years to it, let's say 20 years or so in that corporate space. What else? What are the big learnings that you know, if you're looking back about, you know, things that I hate saying you wish you'd done differently, because you probably don't, right? Because we don't do those things, we don't learn. But like, what have you taken? Do you think that you would share?
I think, well, so I'll turn it around a little way and say the things I am so glad I did and would recommend to others. And I think, you know, one I've already mentioned, working moving internationally. Abroad.
Yeah, I wish I'd done that.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. If you have a family, you have parental responsibilities. It's harder, and you can't just like pick up your life and go somewhere. But if you get the opportunity, and also an organisation that's going to support you around that, I think it is life changing on many aspects. And it's also about what you bring back to the next job and what you also take.
It's good to take risks every now and again, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I really believe that.
Taking risks is huge, definitely. I think another thing I believe that is so important for HR professionals is to have a direct impact on employees. And I've been able to do that for a few ways. Number one, being able to change policies. I started at JP Morgan. You know, for me, it is a powerhouse of an organisation. But we had an extremely strong group HR in New York. So very often you would get amazing pieces of information on work and policies rain down on you, and you'd be, wow, okay, that's watertight, there's nothing I can really say about that. But you never had an opportunity to affect change yourself, and that does get a little bit repetitive. And for me, moving to BNP Paribas, which is not on the same scale, now is arguably one of the largest, it is the largest European bank. HR wasn't in the same league, I would say, and I think that has changed over the years for the better. So I was able to start taking some of our policies and taking some of our organisational decisions and making them you know, with the right inferences and knowledge for the better for our employees. And so, you know, changing parental leave provisions, being able to look at our healthcare benefits and ensure that for same-sex partners everything was equitable, and being able to take a different view very early on. I mean, we're talking now, you know, 15 years ago, and having that impact on employees has been so important for me. And I think as HR professionals, often we towing the line to what the business wants. But I go in and I take my own agenda, and I say, well, no, actually, if I'm going to do this job, there are going to be other things I want to achieve as well.
See, what I love about you is you do it from a position of care and passion. Yeah. You know, and I think that's one of the things that makes you probably amazing as a leader within your organisations. If I was working for you, I'd see that you really do believe, you know, in the things that you're trying to advocate and you're trying to make them happen, and you're coming from the right place when you do that. You know, so that, I think that's quite inspirational. But talk to me about your inspirations. You know, so how do you find inspiration? You know, and what has really made you, you know, sort of feel like this is something I really want to do, or things that have really made you sort of then do things when it's been really tough?
Yeah.
How's that felt?
Yeah, motivation factors. Yeah. Well, I often get this question, how you're very inspirational. How where do you get it from? And I think to be inspirational, you have to be inspired yourself. And so then you need to...
That's very true.
Yeah, and then you need the sources of inspiration. What are those sources? What are the things that make you passionate? What are the things that make your heart beat faster? And for me, it's a bit classical, I'm afraid, but I love theatre. I love the arts. I just came back from Basel. I visited 2 of the best museums in Basel this weekend. And I'm feeling nourished. I'm feeling pumping. I'm still looking at the photos that I took of the paintings, because they're just incredibly beautiful, incredibly insightful. And there was one particular Portuguese female artist I saw a lot of her work, and the storytelling in these classical paintings was just immense. And I walked away feeling very, my chest felt much bigger and brighter, and I really has been thinking about a lot of those pictures. So for me, being able to be in a city like London, where you can get that nurturing and that sustenance from art, is so important. And in my 3 years in Germany, it was limited, and that did have an effect on my character, and a little bit about my also my brightness. And I think now I feel like in London I'm shining again, because I'm getting all of that nurturing.
I think that's a fascinating point. To inspire, you have to feel inspired. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
So let's say we might not be feeling inspired. How do you find that when you are feeling maybe flat, or sometimes we do feel down?
Yeah, a few things. I think I'm a person that rubs off on other people, and they rub off on me in a good way, I should say. And sometimes it can be not, but usually it is. And so I think surrounding yourself with people you like is so important. Having some core friends and even peers and colleagues that you can call up. I have a great friend. Her name is Jodie. She's in the US, and she has been a developmental head of development and a coach for many years, and I call her up quite regularly and say, this is going on, and we just have a real natter, and we just and it really it inspires me, having those kind of conversations with like-minded peers. So I think that also helps. Sometimes you're on a downer though, and you need to get out of that, and it's hard, and I think the only way is taking some days off, changing your environment, getting away from your desk, not looking at your phone the whole time, and doing whatever you need to do, if it's in meditation, breathing, yoga, art, singing, any of those things, to find a different place and get perspective, because I think perspective is the key driver that helps us make decisions, but can also hamper our decisions as well. So I think you have to find something that makes you passionate and bathe yourself in it.
I was going to ask you about things that you've done that you're most proud of, but actually, having had this chat with you, I'm going to ask you something different.
Okay, yeah.
I want to know what are you going to do, Amanda, that you want to achieve in the next sort of period. What does that mean to you? What comes next that you're going to say, I really want to do this?
Well, for me, it's simple. My modus operandi has always been making the lives of employees, humans, better, and that's outside work and inside work. And a lot of people have said to me during this time off, why don't you start your own HR company? You could be an HR consultant, and help make change and culture change. And I'm like, you know what? It's hard enough from doing it on the inside and being employed by the company to do it. I think it's even harder to do it from the outside. And so for me, I think being part of a big organisation or a small organisation and being able to do that is something that will always be the engine that keeps me going. We spend so much time at work, the majority of our lives at the office or in a working mode, no matter where that is or what you do. If that's not enjoyable, your life's not enjoyable. And so I think it's so important to find something you're passionate about. What this year has shown me is that the activities I'm doing outside of work are very much in sync with what I do in work. So I'm definitely in the right field and industry, but I'm able to do it to communities and groups of people that I wouldn't have had that much interaction or exposure with, and that's why this year has been so precious to me.
And a final point for HR. So, lots of discussions at the moment about, where HR is going. Arguably, I believe the function is proven itself to be as important as it's ever been, during the COVID times, and future of work, remote working, engagement, retention, all these challenges that business has been facing. But what's your view about, for HR professionals out there that might be listening to that, where the industry's going and the key thing to stay ahead as a HR professional, what do they need to think about?
We talk a lot about the future skills. We talk a lot about, the future of AI, and I listened to a great podcast this morning around, the recruitment's broken. How do we fix it? And I think there's a big change going to happen in the HR world. But one thing that, and we can talk about that in terms of how AI is going to affect not only talent acquisition and decision making, but it's also going to be a huge enabler. And I know there are a lot of doomsayers that say that AI is going to, of course, reduce manpower and working. But I also think it can be a huge capability pusher and help organisations achieve a lot more. But I absolutely believe that this industry, HR, has gone through a huge metamorphosis in the last few years, because we were at the forefront of decision making, and that will continue. I also think that one of the future skills that we are going to need even more is how we develop and lead people. That has never changed, and that will continue. Because
leadership management is probably as hard as it's ever been.
It is the hardest, I mean, you've got remote working, you've got agile workplaces. You also have a disengaged workforce. We're in the most disengaged, kind of, I don't want to say uninterested, but a workforce that needs more motivation and fire. And how do we do that? It's so difficult to do it when individuals are not present. So we have to find different methods to engage with staff. And I think we did quite a bit of this at Adidas. How do we light people's eyes up again, and community, and creating a environment where we are thinking about the things that are our employees' minds. And when I think about that, it's around, of course, benefits that are focused on helping individuals manage things like the inflation, rising price of inflation. Also, there are still a lot of individuals who are struggling to make ends meet. So how do we help them? How do we give planning advice? How do we we have a very big aging population in the UK now. Are we giving them enough tools to make sure that their retirement is going to be good? So how do we affect the lives and motivate employees? There's also other things such as sustainability is a huge point for our Gen Zs coming up, but also our Gen Xs like we are, James, and also our millennials. So how do we also bring that into what we're doing in our work? And then lastly, I think everybody wants to believe in the purpose of the company they're with,
100%.
And making sure that's totally articulated well at all levels and revisited regularly, because I think this is how companies go off piste. They have a great purpose to start and they bring hearts and minds, but then times get tough. We hanker back down to what we know, and we sometimes can lose our way. So revisiting your purpose regularly is so important.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. When we talk to companies and people, purpose is super important. People want to grow, they want to learn, they want to develop, and they will choose to leave in a way that maybe they wouldn't have done 10, 15 years ago. So I think that experience that we give is much more important than it's ever been. But I must admit, you talk about the future of HR. We've been having conversations with companies, clients, individuals about the skills-based future. I really like that concept. And the reason why I like that concept is it's about potential and not experience. So from a diversity and access point of view, the aging population can access potential roles that they don't have 5-10 years experience of, but they might have the skill to do it. I think that is such a beautiful thing that if we can put into industry and into society, could really impact how people think about work and their opportunities in life. So I hope that happens. It does seem to be coming.
And I think just twinned with that, on the other end of the scale, we know that 2/3 of Gen Z want to be entrepreneurs. They want to work for themselves. So how are they going to develop their skills when they're maybe working on their own and not with a cadre of experienced staff? So these are all great opportunities for I think, big organisations to work with smaller entrepreneurs to start helping them, not just fund, but also help advise, help them give skills, and maybe also placements and different types of opportunities to ensure that the Gen Zs we're bringing up also are getting the exposure to a plethora of skills.
I mean, one thing though, Amanda, I think that in times of change you need to innovate.
Yes.
You know, and as a society I find that innovation, you know, is difficult to deliver.
Yeah.
So I wonder how that we do that. It has to be led by business a lot of the time.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So look, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you today. I'm so grateful you came in to see us, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts for, you know, before we leave?
Oh, well, thank you, James. It's really great to talk to you. I think, you know, we are in a world of great change, as we always have been, but I think it has been size-wise huge in the last year or so, for many different reasons. I mean, we've got two very difficult wars going on at the moment, and more are continuing. We also have a huge poverty crisis going on in the world, and I think and then of course we've got the US election, which is going to be a really pivotal moment for not just the US but a lot of other countries. So I think there's a lot of political unrest and concern, and I think, as HR professionals, how do we navigate that, and how do we, what should be the advice? And I think, I think about this myself as I think about my next role. I think what we have to remember is that we're all humans. We're all individuals that need care, support, and an affirmation of what we can bring together when we work together. And I think organisations have lost a little bit of their grounding around humans, and it's much more about, of course, revenues, profits, and getting to that next quarter, but knowing that people really are the engine of organizations, and just taking time to celebrate that and remember that, and calling out for individuals, to remember that we need motivated, happy humans to do great work in companies. And that really starts with thinking about what engages employees and leading by example.
Motivated, happy humans sounds good to me. Amanda Rajkumar, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.